I'm taking advantage of this opportunity to see you all here. So,
Yes.
Phil, do we need an attorney-client after this 3:30?
we sure do. I've got a few things I wanted to talk about, potential settlement amounts to discuss.
Okay.
We are going live now.
All right. Thank you. And everybody goes quiet.
It's good training, sir.
Yeah. Can't misquote silence, can you?
Oh, I've seen it happen.
Yep.
It can be misinterpreted. I don't know if it can be misquoted.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I
Well
like
played.
that, Chairman. I
Well
like
played,
that.
sir. Well played.
Three 30.
3:30. Let's go live. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Tuesday, February the 23rd agenda session. Now call this meeting to order. Could I have a motion on the minutes, please?
So
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the minutes to approve with a proper second with no objections from the council. They will stand as recorded. We do have a couple of committees this afternoon, Public Works and Transportation, followed by Economic and Community Development. I've also been notified by the city attorney that we will need an attorney-client privilege meeting at the end of our 3:30 this afternoon. So keep all of that in mind as we go through the agenda for this afternoon. Moving down into ordinances on final reading, under planning, we have one item. Is there any questions or concerns about this one item? It is up for second read. Questions or comments? Seeing none, we will move to ordinances on first reading. Madam Clerk, would you read 6A, please?
An ordinance amending ordinance number 9365, substituting Arts Builds for Allied Arts for Greater Chattanooga, Inc. as the official arts agency of the city of Chattanooga to reflect the designated name as Arts Build as the official arts agency of the city of Chattanooga.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, very good. We move now to resolutions under finance. Madam Clerk, 7E, please.
A resolution authorizing the city treasurer to execute a contract in substantially the form attached with Nationwide Recovery Service to provide collection services for the city of Chattanooga for 3 years, beginning March 1, 2021, plus 2 consecutive one-year extensions.
Councilwoman Burrs, any comments or questions?
No.
All right. 7F, please.
A resolution to amend the contract with Russ Blakely and Associates LLC so as to extend the term for 3 months through July 1, 2021 at no cost to provide benefit advisory and open enrollment services and act as agent of record for all benefit options.
Questions or comments? Very well. 7G, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Human Resource Officer to enter into an agreement with Johnson & Associates, Inc. for third-party administration of injury on duty occupational health programs for a 2-year term with renewal option for an additional 3 years for a total contract cost not to exceed $183,480 per year.
Councilman Gilbert.
Yes, sir. I want to defer this to March the 9th. They still got some legal language they got to put into this.
Okay, since that is on the agenda for this afternoon, let's do that at 6 o'clock, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's 7G, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, 7H, please.
A resolution to extend the contract term with comsic Corporation for the Employee Assistance Program. Rates for eligible employees are $1.15 employee per month and $1.49 employee per month for sworn employees for a total contract cost not to exceed $43,500.
Okay, Councilman Gilbert, is this an old hand?
It's old hand.
Okay, any questions or comments? If not, we'll move to IT. Madam Clerk, 7I.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Information Officer to enter into a 1-year agreement with Cornerstone On Demand, Inc. for the learning management system software and support to be used by the city's Human Resource Department for an amount not to exceed $37,515.50.
Questions, comments? 7J, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor's appointments and reappointments for the Board of Construction Appeals, Chattanooga Housing Authority, Chattanooga Public Art Commission, Form-Based Code Commission, and Wastewater Regulations Appeal Board as outlined with the following particulars.
Mr. Attorney, I thought we were going to have some names attached or at least available.
The names are all on the list on here. It is got a, guess it's Scott Owens for the Board of Construction Appeals. It's an appointment. Jim Levine for the Housing Authority for reappointment. The Public Art Commission has got, looks like 5 appointments. John Petrie, Timothy Goldsmith, Miriam Manda, Aaron Cole, Charlotte Caldwell, Lindsay Wilkie. And then 3 for the Form-Based Code Commission, which is Jake Toner, Zach McManus, and Dennis Shaw. And then Joaquin Volts for the Wastewater Regulation Appeals Board, a reappointment. But those are all listed in the body. It's pretty lengthy to put them all in the caption.
Okay, so it's in the, so I don't, okay.
Body of the
Mine's not-
resolution.
It's in a link then.
Yes, sir. It's in that link right now.
Okay, Councilwoman Burrs?
Yeah, I have a question of clarification about Arts Build and the Arts Commission. Who might be able to answer that?
Let's see here. Carrie Hayes. Madam Clerk, would you bring in Mr. Hayes, please? Good afternoon, Mr. Hayes.
Afternoon, Chairman.
Hey, Carrie. So if the Arts Build is the official arts organization for the city, how does the commission fit in? Is it part of Arts Build?
It is not. Arts Build is a separate 501c3 nonprofit that was named many years ago as an official arts organization, to the degree that if national funders or other philanthropic money should come to the city for arts purposes, they needed a place to kind of direct that, which at the time what was called Allied Arts obviously made sense. The Public Art Commission is just responsible for the creation, the administration, and the maintenance of the public art, the physical public art pieces such as the murals and so forth. So I guess think of it as 2 different types of arts related spending. Arts Bill doing more programming, training, educational type work. Public Arts Chattanooga doing the sort of physical fabrication and maintenance of public art pieces.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Great question.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have one other question,
Sure.
please. And this is for Phil. Phil, when we approve all these various contracts for services or IT services or all of that, what happens when you have a change of administration?
Those will continue for the term that is listed in the agreement that is involved. If there is a term of a 2-year or 3-year term for that group, then they would continue to go on. If there is a change in administration and the administration does no longer wants to continue, then they would have an obligation to at least deal with that contract and I guess in that contract at that point in time, subject to any provisions that we have in the contract allowing that contract to be stopped.
So do all of our contracts, when it comes time for a change of administration, do all of our contracts have something in it? And here's where I'm going with this. Every time there's been a major change in administration, there's been a reshuffling of what departments look like.
Right.
So what you have out there are some contracts that in fact could be moot.
Right.
So is there a get out of jail free card with some of these contracts that we're approving? Some of them are a lot of money and our incoming people just stuck with them.
We normally put in terms and conditions in the contracts that would allow termination for convenience of the city, and that would generally be included in our contract
Okay.
documents.
Okay,
We have to be careful about if someone is gearing up and they are providing a number of things for us in connection with handling that, then we would be responsible for some of those items. But each document has a provision in it about termination for convenience.
okay, thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was a great question, councilperson. I want to take, just go back for a second to 7E specifically, and plus 2 consecutive one-year extensions. Does that particular one have an out for the next administration and council built into the contract? That's 7E under finance.
Looking at the contract in here right now.
Sorry about that. I should have asked this before the meeting.
Yes, sir. Let's see, collection activities, right of assignment, collection efforts, recall of claims, assistance, reassignment of claims, data conversion, trust account, reporting requirements.
Councilman Mitchell, would you like for the attorney to look through that? Maybe we can go back. I mean, we'll
No,
come back.
let's move on. I just thought it was a great question. It's something I've been, pondering as we do these things here towards the end. And that was a good specific example of one that are we sticking them with 3 years, or are we sticking them with 1 year with an option to keep going is, I guess, the question. But yeah, I can get that answer later.
The section of that document is section 24. It's over on page 10, and it talks about termination. At any point in time, 30 days written notice, there can be a termination at the request of the city or the other party. And it's got provisions in here about those things that are remaining at that point, about monies that might be outstanding. But it does provide that provision under section 24.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, council, for your patience with me.
Thank you.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to follow up just real quick. Phil, you can get back with me offline, but at some point, a project is deemed vested, and I'm curious as to when that level has been reached in regards to a contract. So we could talk offline, but I know that that's also a qualifier.
Okay.
And you mentioned it, and then Dr. Burrs kind of hit on it too. So I was curious about at what level does that qualifier kick in. Thank you. I'll talk to you later about it.
Okay.
Mr. Vice Chair, before I take your hand, do you have a question for Mr. Hayes?
It may apply to Mr. Hayes, yes.
Okay, all right, go ahead then.
Thank you. Councilwoman Burrs gave us a big enough pause to think through a few of these items that we've already covered, and I very much appreciate that. And one of them, I mean, is even something like the LMS. Chief, can you tell me, normally these contracts say extensions or continuation, something along those lines. This is just seems to be more blanket to enter into an agreement. I thought we had an LMS in place, and if we do, when does it expire? If we don't, do we need to be doing this in this administration?
May I ask which item you're referring to?
Sorry, it's the learning management system, software and support for the HR department.
I see.
Well, it's
I
under
will
information technology, right?
Yes, sir.
Item I.
Yes, sir. Mr. Vice Chair, if I can candidly find some information on that and get back with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do that, but
That's fine. I'm just
great question. Let me make sure I can get an accurate answer for you.
Yeah, and thank you, Councilwoman Burrs, for bringing that up, because I was thinking of that line and wondering, I thought we had something in place, and then you asked that question. I thought this is a perfect opportunity to make sure. So thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Chair.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Hayes or about the contracts? Okay. Madam Clerk, you can excuse our guest. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. While you are letting him out, planning item 7K, please.
A resolution approving a special exceptions permit for use of a late night entertainment facility located at 2301 Milne Street, more particularly described in the attached documents.
All right. Questions or comments? Okay. 7L, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chattanooga Police Department to accept an award of $28,000 from Hamilton County via the 2019 Homeland Security Grant Program to fund two projects, $18,000 active shooter training and $10,000 for police canine for the period of September 1, 2019, ending April 30, 2022.
Councilman Gilbert.
I'm sorry, Chair, I didn't push my button quick enough. I'm just curious. I'd like to hear from, if it's possible, from Councilman Byrd about Kay. I know we had some controversy before when somebody tried to put a club there, and as far as neighborhoods and associations, everybody's fine with this? I want to hear from him because he is the council person for this area.
Councilman Byrd.
Thank you so much, Russell, for that question. Yes, it's kind of a strange situation. The young lady, Diamond Brown, she called myself, Ken Smith, the Neighborhood Association president, Mr. Moreland, a neighborhood community leader there, and Commissioner Mackey. And she sat down with us and just explained to us about the enormous investment she has put into that place. And she assured us that it was not going to be a nightclub, but for this permit, this was the way to allow her to stay open past the time she had to close to sell her food. And so she was selling breakfast. Well, she sells breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and she get a lot of her services after 12 o'clock at night. And so this was a way we were going to be able to allow her to still be able to sell food like she may be a Waffle House. But the thing with this permit, she does have a beer license as well. And so the neighborhood and the neighborhood leaders said they're going to give her a chance and said that they will be happy to see this go forward.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Phil, is this a revocable permit?
Yes, sir.
I thought it was.
And there also has RPA to send out a notice for people so that they can be present if there's a hearing this evening about this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Councilman Gilbert, old hand, sir.
Old hand.
Okay. So just to clarify, Councilman Byrd, is this permit is just for her to sell the food, correct? I mean,
Right.
so that she can sell the food.
She can't sell alcohol, meaning liquor, but if she can sell a beer with a bacon and egg sandwich if she wanted to, because she does have a beer license, but she does have to follow the rules of any place like a Singer to Wing It or a Big Chill, a place that will stay open past 12 o'clock and still sell alcohol and serve food. And she just was telling us in the neighborhood association that it just was hurting her business and her investment by her having to shut down every night at 12 o'clock. She couldn't get the sales that she wanted. And I assured her, the community, myself, and assured this council, if you guys were to allow this to pass, would definitely keep a close eye on it and make sure that, we don't have any issues out of this. But once again, the neighborhood association president and a leader of the community, Mr. Moreland, advised me that day that we should give her a chance.
All right. Vice Chair Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What was the time limit on this? Late night until what time?
She would have to shut down at 3.
Hey, Phil, how much of a difference is there between, say, 3 and 24-hour service? Is it that they would have to serve breakfast in the morning hours? There's some kind of guideline there, but I've actually got a business out in my district that wants to switch to 24 just to stay open because they have billiards tournaments that sometimes run to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, no alcohol, but they want to be able to serve breakfast for those that want to come in really early in the morning. They just end up staying open 24 hours. Is that a significant difference than what we're talking about here?
The problem is that if you have alcohol sales, you're required to close at 3 o'clock in the morning on here under state law regulations right now. So if they're going to be open 24 hours, they clearly couldn't have alcohol sales in the morning.
Well, right. No, I'm not saying alcohol in the morning. I'm just saying if they ran alcohol till 11 or 12, whatever that may, or even 3, if they cut alcohol sales off right there, can they stay open and operate without ever closing as long as they don't do alcohol until, I guess, the next afternoon or evening?
that becomes an enforcement issue problem for your folks who are actually monitoring whether those sales are continuing or not on the sales of alcohol after 3. And it's pretty strict on that 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's the reason they generally have closed at that time. So I'm not sure, at least on the police end of it here, their requirements, but I know that 3 o'clock time is specific for alcohol sales, and generally for all late night events. At least we have that in our ordinance as well.
Yeah, but the stipulation is to stop selling alcohol. Enforcement, we all know, is a totally different issue.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, council, if you would pull up your purchase items for this afternoon. We do have several. Let me know if you have any questions or comments concerning any of those.
Mr. Chair, did we do L?
We did.
I thought we did, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then we got sidetracked. Councilman Byrd.
Yes, sir. Speaking of L and police, I would like to request, if possible, if Chief Roddy is here, someone to allow him to know that I would ask for him to come at 6 o'clock. I would like for him to give me some feedback on a viral TikTok video that's going around our community right now of one of the police officers on the CPD and a young man interaction that they had. And I would just like to ask some questions or get some understanding of what's going on with that, if it's possible. I know it's kind of short notice right now, but if he can get back with us by 6, I would greatly appreciate it.
Okay. Let me make sure he'll be available. Mr. Attorney, could you send out, let's place that. We do not have any items under other business at this moment.
Yes, sir.
Let's place this item under other business in a new agenda.
Okay, sir. All right, on the new agenda. All right.
Well, new agenda item anyway.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
All right, any questions concerning purchasing this afternoon? I'm seeing no hands. If you will now pull up future considerations, which would be at the earliest our March 9th meeting and beyond. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't need to hear anything specifically from Mr. Bailey just yet, but I'm definitely wanting more information on the speed awareness initiative and speed on through streets. He could follow up with me offline. Thank you.
Okay. I see that Mr. Bailey is on the call, sir. And if you would, Mr. Bailey, follow up with Councilman Ledford on this item. Councilman Gilbert.
Yes, on ECD, the first one, where's the location of the soccer fields?
Vice Chair Smith, you want to chime in on that? You're muted, sir. You are muted.
Sorry, I think you said muted and I just totally ignored you, Chair. Sorry. Hey, Councilman.
That's a normal reaction.
Grimes Soccer Complex.
Where's the, say it again?
It's the Cleveland T. Grimes Soccer Complex over at DuPont.
Okay, thank you.
That'd be in District 2 if you want to come visit sometime.
I probably will.
I mean,
You know,
geographically it is.
Oh, you want all of Hickson now? Wow.
That's how it starts.
Let's move on. We do have a departmental report from HR this afternoon. So if I see Ms. Moultrie is on the call, Madam Clerk, if you would bring in Ms. Moultrie, she can direct us as she needs.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon, Ms. Moultrie.
Right. Thank you all for allowing me to come in and give the department report today. I'm about to share my screen so that we can get started. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, good afternoon, and thank you again for the opportunity to present the Human Resources Department report. This report will be a roll-up of the accomplishments and priorities that have occurred under since I've come in April 2018 through current day. What I'd like to do is start off with just a little bit of a background where I will speak to you guys about reiterating the council expectations that you all set, as well as the HR vision, goals, and some of the key priorities. At the onset of, I will say, my entrance into the city, I believe it was day 1 or 2 when I first met the council. One of the things that the council, you all charged me with and asked about was what was the vision for human resources? You were very instrumental in ensuring that that particular vision and the strategy for human resources as it affects the enterprise was set. And of course, that was delivered and developed under your guidance, based off of the expectations that council has set for human resources. And as you see on the screen, one of the expectations that was paramount to you all was for us to recognize that our city employees are our greatest asset, and to ensure that we are promoting the fair and equitable treatment of them. And of course, there are several items, as you see on the screen, for which parameters we would be working in. So the development of the HR vision, which is the vision for HR, is to empower excellence and building competitive advantage through people, for the purpose of fostering an engaged and inclusive workforce, so that everyone really could live the life that they choose here for all Chattanoogan's. So when you think about that vision, one would ask, well, why would that vision about, empowering and fostering and building competitive advantage be important to the city of Chattanooga and to the city government? Well, one of the things that was clear when we did the assessment of the organization and understood the needs was that with the skill gaps, with labor shortages, and for our organization, we have a very tenured organization. What was determined by that is that within the next 5 years, and of course that was from 2018, it was determined or estimated that we were in a position to possibly lose about 25% of our workforce. And that at that time was, postured in an environment where we knew that the workforce demands were changing and expectations of workers were changing, and also just the demographic shift. And again, that impact of the aging workforce and how we start to address making sure that we have talent here at city government to continue to provide services for our residents was, a huge component of this. So the vision and our mission is really couched in the perspective of making sure that we are focusing on talent. We've got to develop the ones that we have. We've got to be able to attract those others in the anticipation of the fact that we do have, retirements for many that are upcoming. So with that, one of the key components of looking at our staffing, it became very, sorry there, getting trigger happy. One of the key components that became very obvious is the projection of the 25% workforce obviously was just that. This slide actually clearly identifies for us, and as you can see, that year over year from 2018 to the end of the year 2020, the turnover rate for the city has postured around 12%. However, when I look at the turnover rate for internal to HR, we are the ones that are hovering around the 20% on average year over year. So as we look at that, and as I begin to talk with you about the accomplishments and the challenges, I wanted to couch the understanding as to where we were starting from in 2018 and where we continue to face opportunities for the future. Excuse me. So as you can see, for 2018, as I arrived, there was much work to be done. we were in the midst of our revisions or the drafting of our employee information guide. We were working with employee groups to try to strengthen those nuances to make sure that the policies that were being proposed and put forth really represented the expectation that not only from expectations from council, but also the voice of our workforce. And some of the accomplishments through that process that we were able to achieve was fill and pay for our non-exempt workforce. In addition to that, we provided a pathway for people working in exempt roles, higher level roles, to be paid beyond the, filling in for 30 days. We were able to have 3 pay days for bereavement, whereas before there wasn't a clear provision for that. And we added 2 additional holidays. Now that's on the direct pay side. Now here's the other piece that was extremely important to us. One of the first council meetings that I attended with you all, I was charged with trying to figure out why is it that some of our workforce was having to terminate their employment in order to get long-term disability benefits. Obviously, you all were perplexed by that example, as was I. What we discovered was that in all of the changes that were happening, we did not have a bridge for employees that had the potential to come back to work to heal. So, for instance, if I were out and I ran out of leave and I just needed an extra 30 days to recover, there was no provision that we had to allow a person to still remain employed and be able to return to work. So through the collaboration with our employee groups and HR, we were able to put in the extended medical benefit leave provision until we were at a place where we could add and bolster up our long-term disability benefit service. In-service long-term disability is the piece that I want to highlight. And there were a host of other things, obviously, the launch of our compensation study, as well as the equity work for the city of Chattanooga. Now, I say all of that to say, as we're talking about, those accomplishments, while those were tall orders and definitely we're very proud of those, we did that at the time where we were facing some huge challenges in human resources. So as an example, we had critical headcount that in previous years had been deleted, but the workload still remained in HR. The team we had gone through, as I came aboard, they had 5 different leaders since 2012. Institutional knowledge was lost. And one of the largest pieces in terms of us managing our health, wellness, and operational budgets, we were doing that without automation. In addition to the fact that because we were instituting some of the changes that were coming about from as a result of our employee information guide, the processes and procedures that the HR team had been relying on, those were dismantled. So the team had to figure out how they operate in this new world. And so those were the challenges that we were facing in addition to being understaffed. So as we get into the year 2019, one of the things, as I look at 2019, there were a lot of huge, accomplishments that were occurring during that time. We were focusing on what I call talent development not only for the HR staff. I presented to you all sometimes last year where members of our team had completed, a rigorous process of education, and they were able to sit and get their professional certification in human resources. That was the piece that we were needing to make sure that we were all singing from the same sheet of music, that we were equipped to be able to handle the services for the city. In addition to that, we developed a leadership pilot and we launched that. That was a pilot for development for the leaders across the city, for city of Chattanooga. There was a lot of good feedback from that. We would hope that in the future that a leadership development program, a full-blown, will be instituted for the city. In the midst, we also, as we launched our volunteer internship program for people with disabilities. We led and facilitated the mentorship program for Big Brothers and Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And of course, we completed the compensation study. And we also, in the midst of all of this, conducted the first ever benefits eligibility audit for the city, where the first year savings was marked at about $800,000. And through all of this, we made sure that we were continuing to engage the workforce. So with every project that we were working on, there were employee meetings and trainings, whether it be about the employee information guide, changes that were coming because of different programs, our compensation, our benefit audits, all of those were direct employee related trainings that we provided. And we did all of that couched with the challenges that we were facing of being understaffed for the critical expertise, still faced with 22% turnover. We did not have compensation staff in place since 2017, but yet we were facing, completing a compensation study, and we were managing compensation in our classification process without automation. So when we start looking at that and looking at the tools that we have and have at our disposal, there were no talent development tools or processes, but we were still able to accomplish great things for the city. And for that, my hat goes off to the team, because these are, while it may seem like words on the page, there's a lot of complexity around each of these projects for which the team had to learn in the moment, figure out how we can still provide service and still be able to garner what we needed from each of these things. So, of course, 2020, that it's, as we've said, this has been a year change like any other year, but this has been one that obviously, as we all know, no one could have predicted, no one knew, and we still don't know where we will end up. But what 2020 has done for us is this, during the time that the pandemic approached, the enterprise was not necessarily thinking about how we could institute remote work at the levels that we have across the enterprise, but we were able to implement remote work policies and strategies, and those things were done to create, the type of organization that we need to be nimble, to be able to still engage and take care of everyone, not only in our workforce, but also provide the service to our city, the employees or the residents within our city. Throughout that pandemic, though, HR has proactively sought to engage our employees, looking for ways to keep them informed about updates and about our policies and our procedures. And we've instituted many online options and platforms so that we can continue to do business. And remember, we were doing this all when the HR office is still very manual. But things that were able to come out of this, and opportunities that were able to come out of this pandemic was we were conducting virtual open enrollment, and our numbers didn't go down. Actually, we had increases in people better understanding some of their benefits, and we saw the enrollments in some of the other areas go up. In addition to that, we now have on our e-portal, it's been updated so that it is a platform and a place where employees can go and get updates, not only about what's going on with the pandemic, but also, about these changes that are happening. We do, these virtual webinars on, healthy lifestyles and how to do fitness exercises, via Zoom or what have you. My point in mentioning all of this is that in the midst of all of this, the enterprise was still able to stay relatively healthy and still have some huge accomplishments. And this could not happen without some of the great staff that I have that works on the HR team and the collaborations that they have and partnerships that they have with the other leaders across the organization. So as we come into the present, the challenges that we're still dealing with and will probably continue to deal with is that the shift in work in our culture it's still causing us to develop new policies in the moment, because we've got to be able to keep the pulse and understanding on what's going on around us, and craft those policies so that they support our employee needs. In addition to it, there's changes that need to be adapted really too quickly, meaning sometimes that change has to happen, within a matter of days. So we're going to stump our toe, making sure that we get it right. But at the end of the day, we're going to learn from it, and we're going to continue on as long as it's bringing the best experience and it's able to serve, our workforce. That's where we're at. So when I think about the COVID demands and the staffing shortages and the increased workload, well, I cannot say enough that could not have happened for our enterprise without very committed leadership, very talented individuals, and people that really care about our employees. And so what I'd like to do is allow you to meet some of the leaders. Now, I'm going to say first off, the representation of leaders that I'm speaking of today by no means represent, these are the only people that have been out there fighting the good fight. These are the people I'm highlighting because they were the ones in some ways that on the front end were in collaboration trying to get those policies developed, trying to figure out, what are the needs for our organization. And so I just want to introduce you to Shay Jefferson, our deputy, Deborah Guy, who's our director of operations, Alicia Neha, who is our compensation performance management person, and Serene Senior, our director of HRMS, or HR management systems and employment services. These are the people that usually when we are talking about changes in policy and how things operate in human resources and the understanding of how they happen and how they need to happen within their business units. This is the team that has been behind the scenes trying to craft those policies and trying to make sure that they were touching our employees in the best way. And they do that under the auspice of some great people that work with them. So when something needs to happen, this is my go-to team to make sure they understand what the expectations are so that can get delivered across the enterprise. In addition to that, on our benefit side, I cannot speak enough, especially of this team and especially during the time of a pandemic. We have, while oftentimes benefits doesn't come up until we need it, or until someone has a question. But during this pandemic, this has taken great effort on the staff of our benefits team, which is led by Madeline Green. Our occupational health person is Starla Benjamin. Cheryl Powell has been very active, helping to ensure that when we have people leaving, helping them to understand their pensions, as well as helping to support the Office of Benefit and making sure that we're able to provide some enhanced services and do it at an economical way and price for us. And last but never least, Melissa Lewis. She is our person that has been also standing in the gap with our leave management. These individuals, they have worked tirelessly. Most of the time behind the scene, no one knows that some of these staff members are working 60 and 70 hours per week. They have been available on the weekend, as well as any time anyone from our enterprise call. They have been the people that have been standing in the gap and behind the scene. Starla and Melissa, you probably will know her name more often. They have been there, but I will say this. It has taken every person in human resources to come to the table to make sure that our employees have been taken care of. We have people that are working in positions that don't work in benefits. That's what cross-training is all about. And we are one HR team, and it takes all of us to get that done. But I wanted to bring some faces to this, because when this is the team, when our employees and our families have been stressed, not knowing what to do because of COVID, or rather they don't understand about their benefits, this has been the team that has helped to stand in the gap to make sure that those questions and those concerns get answered. So, Council, I just want to convey to you and just let you know the contributions of these individuals, their commitment to the city. And again, it just goes without saying that they do this many times without asking for a tap on the shoulder or a thank you. We just owe them so much. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands and recognizes them for the contributions that they've made and that they have continued to make. And I am confident they will continue to do so in years to come. So thank you very much.
All right, if you could pull your screen down. We do have a question by Councilman Mitchell.
Yes, sir.
Thank you and great job. Just a question. I think it's been fairly well documented about the city's this inequities in several areas of pay, as well as in some areas a lack of competitiveness with others in like industries pay. I understand that, and I think this council stands prepared to try to help with that, and I'm sure the next council will also. But I want to ask, what's the one or two greatest policies or processes that are standing in your way of achieving the vision that you showed us at the first of the presentation?
I would say first and foremost, resource. So you mentioned policy. I'm sorry, Councilman Mitchell. Let me back up. So regarding policy, it is so important that we adopt some policies around compensation, classification, performance management, because we do want to have a pay for performance type system. Without providing policies or some type of structure around that, it will continue some of the frustration that we see in our current across our organization today. So I would start there in terms of making sure that we have the right policies in place for how we recognize as well as reward employees. Secondly, I would say the policies and resources around development. If we're wanting to make sure that we are being equitable and that everyone gets an opportunity, we've got to invest in our talent, and so that when the opportunity presents, they're ready. And also, if we're going to ensure that we have talent in city government to be able to provide services, we can't wait until the talent leaves to figure out what we need to do. We have to have policies and practices around succession and constant coaching and feedback. We just need more structure around it. So I would say I would start there.
Okay, so compensation that is justifiable, rational, almost commonsensical, and then of course training and counseling and coaching of employees that are existing would be two areas where you're challenging. What can the council do? And sorry about the follow-up, Mr. Chair, but I
Go ahead.
Do it. What can the council do to help you with your efforts?
First, I would say, I'll say a clear understanding of the issues, so that when administration comes forth with, I'll call it policy changes around direction, understanding that those are couched in the premise of talent development, ensuring equity and engagement for our workforce, and it's also all about the environment. So I'm thinking that if we are coming forth with policies and recommendations for that, it would be great that you all supported those so that we can make that happen. And likewise, of course, with all of those things, it means resource, not only resources in terms of policies, but it requires staffing and it requires the right tool. And I know that's where we are. We have to invest, and we have to make sure that we are good stewards of that. If we are going to focus on how we can be nimble, how can we be innovative, and how we can tap into talent, well, we have to have the proper tools to work from, and we have to be able to use data and in order to make good decisions.
as well as prove our words of that we brought to you when you first started, that our employees are our greatest asset.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Council, let me remind you, we do have two committee meetings still and an attorney-client privilege. So I'll just ask, is there any other comments that or questions that you need to ask of Ms. Moultrie? If not, we'll move on. All right, Ms. Moultrie, thanks so much. Great job.
Okay, thank you,
We
council.
appreciate the presentation this afternoon.
All right, thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk, you can excuse our guest. And as I said, we do have a couple of committee meetings, Public Works and Transportation, followed by Economic and Community Development. So at this time, I will turn the chair over to Councilman Mitchell for Public Works and Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Approval of the minutes, please.
So moved.
Move. Second.
Anybody against that? Okay, we'll move on then. I know what the agenda looks like, but I'm going to start with transportation today and bring Mr. Bailey up because we will have a presentation on our sewer rates. And so I will hold Mr. Payne in abeyance until we can just do all that together. Hello, Mr. Bailey.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can. Or I can. Everybody else? Okay. All right, we're going to start with transportation resolutions that will be both on this week's agenda. Would you please read 7Q?
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to approve change order number 1 for Gresham Smith relative to contract number T15010101 Moccasin Bend Connector, manufacturer's Ham Road Gateway, for an increased amount of $34,600 for a revised contract amount of $271,595.
Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bailey, what's this can cover?
Councilman Henderson, this is specifically for geotechnical analysis that we needed to do to repair the road. It made a tremendous amount of sense for us to repair the paving of Ham Road in concert with our project. And we needed some design work and some geotechnical analysis to do that. So that's what this is for.
So this actually went a little further than what our original contract.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Okay.
This is in association with the shared use path that we've been working on for several years that goes down Moccasin Bend and Ham Road down to the federal park. And so this was a recognition during design that we needed to also include repaving of the street and full depth reclamation that required this geotechnical analysis.
So this is about more paving.
Yes, sir. Maybe I should have just said that.
But that would have explained everything perfectly.
Sure. That is what it is, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Takes care of a lot of ills, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay, all right, let's move on to 7R, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to enter into an agreement with Geostabilization International LLC relative to contract number T21007 for construction services associated with the slope repair and stabilization of Grenada Drive in accordance with specifications as shown on statewide contract SWC 191 slope stabilization services in the amount of $280,130 with a contingency amount of $70,032.50 for a total amount of $350,162.50.
Councilman Henderson, is that Oldham?
Yes, it is, sir. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I don't see any hands on this, so we can move on. Does anybody have any questions? That's all we have as far as agenda is concerned. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Bailey while we have him? Well, I don't see any, and I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to prevent you and Councilman Ledford from hooking up, but can you give me a one sentence, maybe go to two, in your speed awareness initiative? Because I'm kind of interested in that myself.
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman. one or two sentences. We are working collaboratively with the Chattanooga Police Department to identify, using data as well as citizen requests, streets that carry a larger volume of traffic that we can focus on either through engineering changes or education to get drivers to slow down. And we're following that work with recommendations for lowering of speed limits on the streets that we are going to submit to you. This is what we envision to be a first phase of a citywide program to try to make drivers go slower. I think I went more than two sentences. Sorry.
That's all right. But I want you to stop there because I want Councilman Ledford to get first shot at you for some of these improvements for his district because he deserves that.
Chairman, you are the best.
Councilman Ledford, your hand is up.
Hey, Blythe, real quick question. Will we be able to submit suggestions on roads that we're familiar with in the districts that might qualify or be a candidate for lowering the speed limit? I've mentioned this before in the past.
Yes, we've put together a program that enables citizens and certainly council representatives as well to help. We do need to run through some analysis, which takes some time, and we've already done that on about a half a dozen streets, which you'll see in the ordinance that we're going to present in a few weeks. But for a future round, we would be happy to take your input and go analyze those streets. That's partly why we created this initiative, was to be able to respond to those requests.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else from Mr. Bailey? As always, great job, Blythe. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we're going to move now to Public Works. If we can bring Mr. Payne in. And it looks like we're going to have resolutions on today's agenda. The March 9th agenda is still in the making, so it's still baking in the oven. And so we're just going to, both these are just talking about today because we don't have a meeting next week. And so when we have another meeting on the 9th, we'll be covering items for the 9th and the 16th in that meeting. Hello, Mr. Payne.
Good afternoon.
Let's start with resolutions 7M, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number R15002202 Sturchy Farm Phase 2 to Thomas Brothers Construction Company, Inc. of Hickson, Tennessee, in the amount of $247,520.55 with a contingency amount of $10,000 for an amount not to exceed $257,520.55.
I see no hands, so we'll move to N, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to approve change order number 1 final for Willoughby Roofing and Sheet Metal, Inc. relative to contract number Y20010201 replacement roofing systems for Avondale Head Start for a decreased amount of $76 to release the remaining contingency amount of $6,850 for a revised contract amount of $68,453.
Councilman Gilbert.
Yeah, this is for the first one, M. Can they send me or email me the plans on this second phase so I can see what's going on?
Yes, sir. Certainly. We'll be glad to send those over to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No hands on N, so we'll move to O.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to approve change order number 1 for Crowder Gulf of Theodore, Alabama, relative to contract number E20-008-201, disaster collection and disposable services contract for an increased amount of $1,232,250.29 for a revised contract amount of $1,679,790.29.
Councilman Ledford.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. Bill, is this the unpaid invoices we discussed last week?
Yes, it is. These are unpaid invoices from the emergency contract that were not paid before that emergency PO was closed out. So we're just increasing the second purchase order by this amount in order to pay these now. Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Oh, P, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to renew contract number W19-024201 with BLD Services LLC for sanitary sewer mainline full wrap services connection seals for 1 year with 1 year renewal option remaining for the amount of $460,000 annually.
Okay, I see no hands. Okay, I see a hand. Councilman Ledford.
Chairman, this is not for item P. I was holding for any questions on that. If I may just take 1 second to thank Public Works for listening to council and taking our words to heart. This past weekend, city crews were out picking up litter in their specially equipped trucks, and people were very excited. They were on social media. I want to thank Bill for sending me out that communication so I could warn people as they had to back up quite a bit on Jenkins and Igo Gap. But I just wanted to thank the employees of Public Work and the leadership of Public Works, because we've been talking about this. I know you've been talking about it, Chairman, quite a bit. And I think with the weather coming and COVID releasing its grip on us, we're able to get back out there. And I just wanted to thank the city Public Works Department openly, and keep up the great work. And we appreciate it out in District 4 and all over the city in general.
Thank you for that. We appreciate it. I know we've tried to help keep you all aware of that situation since you raised it to us. And so earlier this afternoon, I know we sent out another update. I think in the last 2 weeks, there have been 690 bags of litter collected, and about 68 tons, I think, of total litter collected either by hand crews and that's across the city. So we're certainly continuing to do our best, and we're still supporting that with primarily with our resources, because we're still is very, very limited in the support coming from the court system right now. But as you say, we're hopeful that will improve, and they'll be able to support us better, and we won't have to pull from as many other sections as we are right now. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And if I could, and thanks to Councilperson Burrs for being a catalyst in this also. I can see right before my very eyes your organization becoming more organized about this, and please, as you did for Councilman Ledford, when you're going to be in a district or an area of a district, prior notice to the council person would be awesome. I mean, that, because we all have our communication lines with our constituents, and that would be something that would, improve it greatly. And we can hopefully, as a community, get behind your efforts and stay out of your way as much as possible. So thank you for that. Anything else from Mr. Payne before he goes into the sewer rates discussion? This ought to be a good one, gang. All right, go ahead, Mr. Payne.
Certainly, and I'll if I could ask for Jeff Rose to be brought in to join us. Jeff has got a presentation, and he and his team have pulled together a lot of good information. I know, and I'll start out by making some opening comments, because I know time is precious. But a couple of weeks ago, of course, we talked about water quality fees and those increases, and then last week council requested for something similar regarding sanitary sewer fees and where those rates are. And so in order to be responsive to that, Jeff and his team have pulled together some information to give you some brief background on where we are, how much of it is, of course, very, very deeply tied into the consent decree. And there's some very extensive financial modeling and planning that has gone into making sure that we are doing all we can to try to balance the regulatory needs of the division and the department against the fact that we know there is an impact on the ratepayers, and trying to balance those things so that people can plan and predict and what impacts they may see to their household budgets without seeing unexpected spikes. And so that is a very important part of it. So we appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. And Jeff, I'll let you start out. We promise we've only got about 9 slides of information, so we will run through it and try to be very conscious of your time. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I'll share my screen now. And yeah, we do want to be as concise as we can, but also try to give a full explanation or as much as we can. So I'm gonna minimize. Okay, yeah, this is just to talk about rates. We want to give you a picture of how rates are set and adjusted. And we have a couple slides that will show. I'm gonna go to presentation mode. We'll have a couple of slides that will show some explanations here, and then some more. We'll have some graphs and things to try to define it a little better, make it easier to understand. So our financial model and plan, these are tools we use to determine the sewer adjustments necessary to provide for revenue sufficiency for current and future projects. So we use the model and plan to do that. Current funding sources for capital improvement plan and state revolving loan funds and operational capital. Those are kind of current funding sources that we use to fund our projects. Future funding sources may also include bond proceeds, which we haven't done yet, but we've proposed, and as well as Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, which is called WIFIA in the circles. That's another funding mechanism where the federal government has provided some funds for water infrastructure type projects, similar to SRF, but it's for larger projects, which we have some of those coming up. Our consent decree and all other WRD capital projects are included in our model and in our plan. And the 5-year funding plan is revised each year as annual budgets are approved. And we have a long-term capital improvements plan, which is projected through 2031. Okay, our financial model that we use is developed using Waste Resources' latest approved budget, the annual budget, the comprehensive annual financial report, as well as funding source loan information that has things like interest rates that we put into the model to give us the rate adjustments that are recommended. So the goal of the model is to provide a forecast for rate and spending to ensure regulatory requirements and important financial criteria are maintained. And these are some of the most important criteria we look at. Debt service coverage ratio, which means we have enough money to pay our debt. Ending year balance, just cash on hand. That gives us some opportunity to pay for some projects out of cash, but also gives us a buffer for emergencies that come up, which could be large at times. Positive net change in asset value. That's something we just have to show that we are not losing value in our utility assets through the year. We're not disappearing by depreciation, that sort of thing. We're replacing our assets in a responsible way. And then one of the most important things, of course, is that we're having a balanced impact on ratepayers. When we first began the consent decree program, there was affordability analysis done, and it was agreed by the leadership and elected officials at that point that we would not have any rates more than 10% per year. And so that's what you've seen, several at 9.8 through the years. And so that's what we've stuck to. So those are some goals we try to achieve. And next 3 slides, we're going to show some graphs that talk about the dollars that directly affect rates. So what we show here in this slide is a historical and 5-year Waste Resources capital funding plan. So this funding plan is where we get the money to pay for our projects. This funding plan is approved by council. And you see you've approved the budgets up through fiscal year 21. And our funding plan includes funding from debt financing as well as cash funding. So the debt financing shows up there that we've used SRF loans. That's been our primary debt where we've borrowed money from the state revolving loan fund. And those have allowed us to execute projects in the short term to help meet our consent decree requirements. We didn't want to have massive rate increases to do projects all at once. So we were able to borrow money and we're paying it back over time. Most of these are 20-year loans. So SRF is very low cost money to borrow. It's 1% or less right now to borrow that money. And our other way to pay to fund our projects, our capital projects, is through cash funding. Operating capital, we call it here. It's the yellow block on top. And, we might call that pay as you go, that kind of funding. And what this does, it helps us to balance impact on customers in the long term, because we don't want to have to build up too much interest payment long term for this massive amount of money. It helps us to balance short-term and long-term impacts on rates. And then you see going forward, the phased out or a little bit dashed blocks are our funding plan going forward. So you can see how it begins to drop off as we get some of these projects funded and begin to do the work. So this is our funding plan. And then the next slide is our total spend plan. Historical and 5-year waste resources total spend plan. And what this shows for the same time period is how we'll be spending our money. And you might recognize the first, the blue blocks and the red blocks. Those are our capital projects. On top of that, the green blocks is the O&M budget. So if you look, I'm going to flip back to this last slide. You can see it kind of goes up and there's a sort of a peak and then it starts to come down. That's generally what's happening here, a peak early and then this later peak where we're funding our capital projects, so those match each other. Now, the O&M budget is over top of that, and what we see there is just our general operation and maintenance budget, and that goes up. What we see is the O&M naturally grows with inflation, over this time period. This is a 13, 14-year period. But also we begin to see a shift from some of the pay-as-you-go funding to more of we're paying back loans. So more of our operation and maintenance budget goes to start paying back loans as opposed to cash paying for projects. So we continue to, balance these financial factors to reduce the rate on customers as much as possible. The next slide here, we show historical and projected sewer rate adjustments. Now this takes us from the beginning of the consent decree up through this year, fiscal year 21, where we had the 0% rate increase. And as you can see, this actually, we could have shown this first, because one thing this does is when we say we're not going to raise rates more than 10% in any one year, that sets the funding at that point. And then it sets the spend, how much money we can spend, which in turn sets what we have to do to go find funding for those projects. So with this given amount of money, these 9.8% rate increases over the first 5 years, we're able to do what we need to do with projects, capital projects, and maintenance, operations and maintenance. The 6% drop there was we looked at the money we had coming in and what we had going out. As you recall, some of the funding plan actually went down in that time frame. We said we can have less of a rate increase this year, and we did that. The next year, we began having more rainfall events. We said, okay, in order to meet consent decree requirements, we're going to have to ramp up our attention to things like wastewater storage and other rehab projects. We said, oh, we need to go back to the 9.8. So we did that for 1 year, and then COVID hit, and we took a drastic drop in rate increase to 0, just for the saying, you know, look, what can we do to help this situation? We know folks who have less income and that kind of thing. So this is one thing we can do. So we dropped the rate increase to 0 for this fiscal year, and we're projecting to go back to 9.8 for next year. One thing it took us to do to drop that rate to 0 was to shift a lot of capital spending 1 year to delay projects. It took some effort to do it, but you know, we worked it out with Jacobs, our program manager, and our staff, and we're able to make it happen. We also have some good balances that allowed us a buffer to do that too. So, and as you can see, as we go forward, oh, Bill, did you want to say something there?
I'll let you finish on this slide, but I was just going to add something before you move ahead.
Okay. Yeah, as we go forward, we are projecting one more 9.8% rate increase. That's this coming fiscal year. And then we drop to 6 for 5 years. And then it goes down below, as you can see, down to 2. And that becomes kind of a maintenance level. But this is our projections at the moment. You know, things could change to make that need to change, but right now this is based on our financial model. This will help us pay for our consent decree projects and also not overextend customers, we believe. Go ahead, Bill.
Right, and just to add briefly to Jeff's point, each year had we looked at this last year, the plan would have looked differently. The timing of those, you know, when did the drop occur and how far would the drop go down looks different, because we were at that 9.8% level. So just to let the council know, these are very much just projections based on today, but you know, should there be changes either next year or in some future year, similar to what had to be made for FY21 of a 0% rate increase, that very much ripples all the way through and does have impacts all the way through. So just be aware that all of those things are subject to change annually. So while it's a plan that only works if it's all implemented each year according to those things, and we don't have any other outside influences, whether that's regulatory impacts or changes in market conditions, construction costs, and other things as well. So there's lots of different variables, but it's what the current projection looks like. So,
right, and we also, you know, this gives us these come out of our financial model. This is what the model generates, and it allows us to balance these pay-as-you-go monies projects along with debt finance projects and all those other financial factors that we look at to make sure we stay, you know, responsible with customers' money. The next thing we wanted to show is a little comparison of where we land in comparison with utilities around us. This is average Tennessee and Southeast residential user charges. And these are all for 5,000 gallons a month. That's the number we use. It's about an average usage for most utilities. And all the ones that have a little star by them have a consent decree in place. Most of these are on a river, and these, you know, systems that have rivers traditionally didn't care that much about it. So about where the sewer went, it could just go in the river. Well, of course, that doesn't work now, you know, for the last 30 years. So we're working to repair those things. And so there's tends to be more of a financial load on these systems to repair and rehabilitate sewers. So ours falls, as you can see, Atlanta's the highest at $87.44 a month. And you can also see some of these years are 2019. That's just the latest data we had on hand. Ours is actually a 2021 number. So some of these others have probably gone up in that time frame. Just to get a little comparison. And the question has come up, how is my bill calculated? How is a typical residential monthly bill calculated? So on the left side here, we have meters, size, and monthly minimums. And on the right side, we have rate blocks and the volumetric charge per 1,000 gallons. So what we do is, most residential customers have a 5/8 inch meter. The monthly minimum charge to have sewer provided to a home with a 5/8 inch water meter is $24.63. Now we automatically do a 10% discount. And so the actual monthly minimum for residential users is $22.17 per month. Then on top of that bill, on top of that amount, you also are charged for volumetric rate. So how much actual wastewater do you use? So with this first rate block you see is $11.99 per 1,000 gallons. Again, we apply the 10% discount, and that comes out to $10.79 per 1,000 gallons. And the 10% discount also just shows, we're trying to acknowledge that all water is not used inside the house. So these are volumes that are measured with the water meter. And then we obtain those meter readings and we charge sewer based on those meter readings. So at that volumetric rate, $10.79 per 1,000 gallons, which I like to say is about a penny a gallon, which is not too bad, for treating somebody's wastewater, about a penny a gallon. The typical residential bill ends up being $53.96 per 5,000 gallons. So that's generally the typical residential bill.
Jeff, hold on just a second. I've got a couple of hands that I don't know if we move too far down the line. Are these hands for when he finishes, or do we need to ask questions now?
Mr. Chairman, we're by my question, so we'll just let him finish at this point. As far as I'm
let's
concerned.
finish.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we can back up to at any point and look at things. We're almost to the end here, so. So this is just a graphical view of how we do this. So the monthly minimum charge is $22.17 for the standard residential customer. A 5,000 gallon usage brings that average bill to $53.96. And then the monthly maximum bill is based on 12,000 gallons. We top the bill out for residential customers at 12,000 gallons, which is $129.49. If somebody goes over 12,000 gallons, they're not charged for that difference. That again helps account for water usage outside the home and that sort of thing that does not enter the sewer line. So we wanted to also show a quick comparison of the water rate, because we were getting questions about, well, I hear my water bill is supposed to be 2 times or 1 time or 6 times my bill, my water bill. So when we look at the typical bill for a 5,000 gallon usage for a Tennessee American customer who has a standard 5/8 inch meter, it's $24.11. So they're the same bill. Their sewer bill is going to be $53.96. Eastside Utility District, their bill is $21.35 for 5,000 gallons. Their sewer bill is the same. And then you'll see again with Hickson Utility District, theirs is the lowest. Wow. Because of the type of water treatment they have. It's a very, very simple treatment, and they're very lucky in Hickson to have that low of a water bill. Their sewer bill is the same, because these rates are based on not on any kind of multiple of water. It's just the volume of water used times the rate that's calculated to pay for all the things we showed before. So that's how we come up with those bills. Water price set by the water provider. So So that, I think that's the end. Yep. And I can take the presentation down or leave it up if there's questions as we go.
Are we council, are we going to need slides?
I'm gonna need a slide.
Okay. All right, so let's leave it up for now and see how this works. I can't tell, but I'm going to start with Chairman Henderson and then go to Councilperson Burrs, then Ledford, then Smith.
Thank you, sir. Jeff, well, a couple of things. Can you send this slide presentation to all the council?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Go back to the 5-year capital funding plan, and then I think that was followed by, yeah, right there.
Okay.
Okay, and so help me understand the difference between this slide and the next slide. Is this slide saying this is what we think we're going to need, and the next slide is funding it, or what? Help me understand the difference between two slides.
Right.
Because this slide goes way down in 26. It goes to 21 million. So.
Right. What we're saying with this slide is this is where the projects that we're going to do, the capital projects that we have done all the way from 13 up and through this year. I didn't mention the bond proceeds. We have bond proceeds approved, but we haven't gotten those yet because we haven't spent that construction money yet. So this is the plan to fund the projects that we're required to do under our consent decree and also under normal CIP. So we're saying we'll raise our rates. Raising our rates will allow us to acquire this funding. And this funding will carry us through this spend plan. That's the difference.
And when we say that's the spend plan, that's also sort of the revenue plan. I mean, that's
I would categorize it as, Jeff, if you back up to the previous slide, this slide is telling you the source of where do the dollars come from. Is it operating capital that came from the ratepayers? Is it a loan from SRF, or is it a bond proceed? And the year that we got it. If you go to the next slide,
but this represents spending for capital projects, basically.
Well, this represents the year in which the revenues come in to be spent. The next slide represents, if you can switch to that slide, represents what we would spend those on. Now you have to keep in mind, for example, the way the city is set up financially and fiscally. Before we bid a project and award a project, all of the dollars for that project have to be in hand before the project even is advertised. So for example, the $50 million project on Ham Road for equalization stations, all $50 million had to be in place before we could advertise that project. We will spend those dollars over a 2-year period or so, constructing the tanks, paying the contractors, that sort of thing. So we may start out with a smaller amount of money in the beginning to hire the consultants and get started, but we cannot move forward to construction. So this is not when the expenses occurred. This is based on the projects that were allocated, I believe, for those years. So if you were to look at actual expenditures for projects, they tend to lag even a little further than this.
Okay, but so the green, the O&M in the future years, 22 through 26, begin to have your interest payments or your loan payments built in to those figures. Is that correct?
The debt payments go up. Yes.
Okay. And did I hear you say that we treated this sewer water for 1 cent a gallon? Did I hear you say that?
It's approximately a penny a gallon. So I like to keep that one in my head, just slightly over that.
Okay. And I'm assuming that may go up though in future years. Is that
it is going up, like you saw, 9.8% this year. So instead of a penny a gallon, it's maybe 1.1 pennies a gallon.
Okay. And then just real quick follow-up, if you take it to the chart where you had some up and down the rate increases,
this one,
so we do anticipate starting and basically we approve the increase in the new budget. Is that correct?
Yes. That's correct.
The increase is in the new budget. So July of this year, our constituents can expect to see an increase in their sewer bill.
Yes.
Okay. And so,
or it may come at different times in the past. It's not come all at once in July. Sometimes it has been staggered, and a part of the increase occurs in October with the balance of it in April. And so I think that has varied from year to year. It may not happen. It may not happen July 1st. I think that those are some nuances that are specifically inside the bill, and we would talk about those when the formal budget is presented.
Okay, so FY23 in July, they can start expecting to see less of an increase from year to year.
That's what
at
we're
least
projecting.
projected.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilperson Burrs.
I don't need the charts, so my colleagues can go ahead. Mine are general questions.
Okay, Councilperson Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Jeff, from start to finish, the consent decree, what would be the answer if someone were to ask me, how much is my sewer rate gone up in order to pay for the consent decree? Do we have that estimate?
Well, if you look at this chart right here, you can see 9.8% increases. That shows 5, 6, 8. I'm just thinking, I'm not the economist or anything, but I know the rule of 72,
That's, yeah,
if you
that's what I
have,
was wondering.
10% rate increases for 7 years in a row, that doubles your rate. So that's what we've seen roughly is a doubling of the rate from the time the consent decree started, maybe a little more actually.
So when someone asks us, why has it gone up, and we say the words consent decree, can you give me a 1 or 2 sentence answer that that may help satisfy that question? Because most people, when you say consent decree, go, I don't know what that is. And,
right.
And all I know is that my sewer bill is jacking up every year.
Right. Well, in the wastewater department, we have to report every time wastewater comes out of the wastewater system, and we call that a sanitary sewer overflow.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, that is a violation of the Clean Water Act. And so EPA, beginning, I don't know, probably 20 years ago, started writing some major, ours is called a consent decree. Some others have been like, they didn't consent. They just got it put on them. With the consent, it's called a consent decree because we agreed with the judgment that the federal court came to in negotiation with EPA to say we will do these projects in order to eliminate sanitary sewer overflows. Mm-hmm. And we will do them in a certain time frame. And they generally have costs associated with them. And so, it changes just based on, you go in, you start inspecting, and you find things. Some things are worse, some things are not as bad. And so that's the program we're doing.
And I would add to that just quickly, Councilman Ledford, I think it could probably, a lot of this is probably summarized by that it's a combination of deferred maintenance and deferred upgrades that had accumulated over a long period of time. There was prior to the attention being placed on the enforcement side of the Clean Water Act that Jeff just mentioned. A lot of the city's policy was in order to treat wastewater in the most efficient way as possible. And a lot of times there were some decisions made in the past. I'm not saying they were correct. I'm just saying that it's what happened, that there were some decisions made in the past to continue to operate things in the most efficient way, which saved ratepayers dollars. Unfortunately, that also meant there were certain things that did not get addressed as completely as they needed to be. They were addressed partially, but not completely. And so I think that is probably the best summation of it that I can come up with.
That's how we got here. Exactly.
Yeah. So we're paying for sins of the past, so to speak.
Yes. So to speak. And we're also, what we're doing now is going to help generations to come also. We're setting the thing up so it will serve, we look at often 50-year time horizons. We're not going to put something in the ground we think is going to collapse in 10 years. It's got to have a long life to it. So, we look for those kind of things also.
Okay, so a short answer would be it's kind of a federally mandated solution that we had to arrive at, and that's where we're at.
That's correct.
Okay, I can digest that.
Yeah.
Chairman, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anytime anybody had any questions, you're welcome to call me, and our contact or something, and I'll do my best to answer your question.
Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Jeff, Bill, thank you for addressing this. It has definitely exploded, even over the last several weeks, the amount of communications about sewer rates. And being familiar with it over the last number of years already, it still helps to kind of see the way that this has been laid out. So my question is actually, I've got several, but really it still all boils down to this slide. So when we're talking about a 9.8% increase year over year, some of the questions that I'm getting are, okay, so if this is based on, if these increases are due to the consent decree, it's something that's unavoidable on our part. It's extremely expensive to do these projects. And that's the reason that these rates are being put into place, is to adhere to that. At some point, a logical person would say, okay, eventually those repairs are going to be done. So does that mean that my bill goes back down to what it was, since we're not doing these incredibly expensive repairs? Obviously, we got in this situation because we didn't do repairs. So I wouldn't expect it to go back down to where it was. But I do have a question about it continually increasing, even though we are accomplishing some of these projects. So why, over the period of the time frame that we're showing here, if we are successful in accomplishing a lot of the projects, and we can stop the West Bank overflow, east and west, why would we continue to increase year over year, even 2%?
Sure, and I think Councilman, probably the best piece, and looking at the presentation, it's slightly darker shaded on this particular slide from FY21 back to the left, and that's to sort of illustrate what has happened and to help break that out. One thing that would probably help this slide answer that question is if we were to shade in just the time period of the consent decree itself. The consent decree itself was broken into two phases. I believe the first phase was 5 years. The second phase is about 10 years. There's roughly a couple of year gap in between those two while there was some evaluation and review that was going on with EPA. So we're talking really about 17 years that it takes to be able to spend, identify the projects, get them designed, get them built, put them in the ground. But as Jeff mentioned, there is this shift and this transition in order to not continue to have escalating rate increases of 10% by shifting to more debt service. And that debt service is going to take some time in order to pay down. So I think those are parts of that answer that we'll just have to look at and see, when we get to the end of the consent decree, where are we in terms of, what projects are just needed in order to be able to maintain the system and be able to continue those on, which projects, have been, built, things like, these large equalization stations that may just be, servicing the debt, is the primary expense, and there's not another huge capital expense that's needed on those. So I think that's part of the answer, and we'll just have to look and see where we are. I'll also say the consent decree identified many priority areas that needed focus. But I know Jeff and I have had the conversation that there are other projects and other things that are needed just because of the age of the infrastructure, the age of our equipment, and other things that we have, which are going to continue to need they need continued updates and repairs too. We'll have to see what the timing on those is and when we reach the end of the life on those projects and what their impact is to this. So I think right now this is just a function of where we are. Certainly, the end of this is, seeing, as you mentioned, those 2% increases at the end. That is literally at the tail end of the consent decree. And honestly, I think right now it's a projection, and it's hard to know exactly where we'll be at that point in time. Certainly, we can't. We're not ruling out that it couldn't go to zero. Just like we're also saying, we can't guarantee that it won't be more than 2% when we get to those years as well. So I think fluctuations in these projections are normal and should be expected in that, and we'll certainly continue to do all we can. As we mentioned in the beginning, and as Jeff iterated during his presentation, the affordability analysis is a critical component of doing this, and that is part of where we're at within the consent decree, is that affordability, which has a definition, under the federal consent decree, is considered as part of all this, and we'll continue to keep that forefront, as well as maintaining compliance with environmental regs.
I appreciate that, Bill. And when you guys send the slide out, would you mind including just literally a short summary? You could look at the slides and start calculating, but just a real quick glimpse of how much revenue has been generated just based on the sewer rates, and then how much money has been spent to date on any of the repairs. It doesn't just have to be consent decree, it's all consent decree related for the most part, and how much money has been spent, and then obviously, the balance being the debt service piece. Just seeing those numbers together would be helpful to know too, to really share a glimpse of how significant of repairs and maintenance that these systems are undergoing right now. So thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Jeff, could you take your screen down, please?
Yes.
Councilman Ledford, is that an old hand?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
That's all right, no problem. Councilperson Burrs.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Jeff, that was a great presentation. I've got a couple of just basic questions. When you kept talking about a model that you used, where did the model come from?
The model is a financial model that Jacobs Engineering developed for us, and we've been using it from the start of the consent decree. And we've done a rate study here and there by a couple of consultants, but generally the financial model, it considers all those pieces. It's actually kind of interesting to see if you're into numbers, but it's very, very detailed, and it's easy for us to be able to plug numbers in and see what happens.
So, okay, so your funding is coming from revenue, loans, bonds, and are there any assumptions in it? I remember when this first came out and when we got hit for being negligent for a number of years to what they were saying. And I remember that we've used things today that I'm not sure I remember hearing before. Like we approve increases in the budget, and yet that's kind of moot. Do we have a choice in approving increases if it's based on a model?
You do have a choice. I mean, you can choose, we will not increase your rate. If you say we will not increase the rate, that affects our ability to borrow those low interest loans. So then that affects our ability to do the projects, which affects our compliance with our consent decree.
So when you're talking about rates, you're talking about the cash you have on hand that will allow you to borrow money because you're solvent, right?
Right. We have the ability to pay the debt back. That's one of our big factors. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. And so if we don't approve a rate at a certain level, is there any point where the assumptions kick in? And I know, tell me if I'm not being clear about this, but if we approve a rate at a lower level than say 9.8 or whatever,
Right.
then that fund has a lot of money in it. What a bank, where do we hit where we're putting our ability to get loans in jeopardy?
Right. Well, I can tell you, just as we were looking through this, and we could model that pretty easily. We could see what if you approve something less, we would put that directly in the model and see where we hit. Right now, as we looked at this thing, we were managing a dip in some of these numbers that was going below some of our targets in 27, 28, 29, and 30. That's where some of those numbers went down. And, it's okay that they go down as long as we're projecting we're gonna stop spending so much money, and we're gonna be able to build ourselves back up to the reasonable debt service ratio, fund balance, those kinds of things. So that's what we're managing now. Yeah.
So where I'm going with this is if we have, and you don't need to go into all the assumptions, I get it. But I remember the first model, I don't believe in any place had rates going up to 9.8%. And I know we've had to adjust it, but I'm wondering where do we, it's not even taking a risk, where do we adjust rates perhaps a little downward? I know we like to be super conservative, particularly in our finance office, and that's not a bad thing. Right. But what I'm trying to get my arms around is there a way to more even some of this rate level out so that it doesn't hit people and obviously won't harm any of our ratings or anything like that? Have you all done any of those assumptions?
Well, we've looked at various times as things we could do, like, for example, when the COVID crisis hit and we said, and we had planned a 9.8% rate increase. We said, what does this do to us if we go to zero, just straight to zero? And so we just everybody gets busy and starts churning numbers. You put things into the model. We say, as long as we bring it back up to next year, it doesn't affect us too much. If we came down again, then we would again have to be stretching some of these construction timetables out. Some of these projects would get stretched out. Some might get postponed for a year or two or three.
Does that matter?
Does it matter? Yeah, the thing that matters is our compliance with the consent decree. And we want to make sure, we're doing our best to comply with that. So we could comply minimally with it, probably cost less than complying with some buffer. That's the reality. We can comply later.
And Jeff, I think part of what you're saying in that is it's a conversation that we've had is there's two components to the consent decree. One is reduction and near elimination of SSOs. There's also some projects that are identified. Right now we're in a position where we're all making some assumptions about how effective a project will be at reducing SSOs, and if it turns out that a project is less effective in reducing SSOs, then that means that we don't get as much credit, so to speak, under the consent decree. So when Jeff talks about having a buffer and complying minimally versus complying with some buffer, the buffer is there in case we get to a point where it's like, okay, well this project achieved more than we'd hoped, and so that's good. Versus if all we ever try to do is try to hit the minimum, then that's the point where we find ourselves at the end saying, oh man, we haven't done nearly enough. And I think some of the discussion about the Tally Road SSO that we discussed a few weeks back, and that presentation, I think Jeff mentioned that we had done a project at 23rd Street. We found that there was reductions, but we still had an SSO that required spending some additional dollars outside of that in order to get us to that point of eliminating that chronic SSO. But chronic SSOs really, I think, are one of the main driving points, and West Bank is a big part along with all the others because they're all critical.
Well, so what you're saying is it's very important that you not guess wrong or assume wrong. And I get that. Just one last comment. When we're looking at the budget for next year, knowing all of this, I'm wondering if there's some way you might talk with Jacobs or whatever to see really, is it a risk not to hit people quite so hard and more have more of a smoothing aspect to it. Just something to think about. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that some other time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Last question goes to Chairman Henderson. We are probably already running over on Chairman Oglesby's time, but sorry about that. Go ahead. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah. Here we go. Real quick, Bill or Jeff, what was the original, when we first got hit with it, what was the original projection of how much this was going to cost?
Phase one of the consent decree, I think, was 250 million. We ended up spending, I think it's, I have to look back at the numbers, but 267-ish, something like that. Okay. The second phase is another chunk, and there's still more projects required. And so that's,
what's estimated on the second phase?
The second phase is actually estimated. It's about a 10-year program. It's around 400 million right now is what we're showing.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anything else quickly for Mr. Payne? Thanks, Jeff, by the way. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, I see no more hands. But I would echo Councilperson Bird's feelings and I'm hoping as a department, you have several funds and you're not just looking at sewer when you're coming up with this, but you're also looking at stormwater fees and things like that too, to just not brutalize folks out there trying to pay their bills. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I think that's going to be all for Public Works and Transportation. Mr. Chair, can I just turn it over to Chairman?
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, take it.
Let's excuse our guest.
She's on top of it.
Great. There you go. Welcome to today's ECD committee meeting. In the interest of time, I ask for the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. No further questions. We'll move on to resolution, for which I understand A, B, C, and D has previously been read into record. So if there's no questions or comments regarding those items, and I see no hands, we will move on to our annual pilot report for 2020. Madam Clerk, would you please bring up Donna Williams? Miss Williams is. Hello, Miss Williams, how you doing? I know you got a great presentation for us, so if you'll bring it up, we will proceed with the pilot report. You're on mute. Donna, you're on mute. There you go.
We're doing a lot of muting today, aren't we? Ms. Madison is actually we're going to be using her slides.
Even better.
She's going to be driving, yes. There she is.
Okay.
Daisy, you're going to be sharing your screen. You're muted.
There you go.
Okay, guys.
It's all yours, Daisy.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was sharing.
Yeah, Karen also has it. So here, do you want Karen to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that's what we had discussed. I'm sorry. Okay, so in the interest of time, here's a couple things I want to let you guys know. So, in the budget discussion and the question of budget priorities, you all on January 26th presented the priorities that have been communicated to you by your slide one, thank you, by your constituents. And 5 out of 9 of you indicated that your constituents had indicated to you that affordable housing was an issue. And you're going to see why that is, why affordable housing is an issue. So the pilot is just one, thank you, Daisy. The pilot is just one of many incentives that the city uses to entice developers to bring investment to the city in order to provide housing to very low to moderate income families. The pilot that we're under right now was implemented, and there have been 3 pilots. The first pilot came into, the ordinance was voted on in 2002. We'll talk about that. And under this administration, there have been 2 pilots, 2 versions of the pilot. But I know everybody gets confused about what is affordable housing. So Daisy, if you'll go to the next slide. This, I can't remember what grade we learned this, and sometimes I forget, but median means that half the people above the line and half the people below the line, that line in the center is median. It's not average, it's median, okay? So according to HUD, as of July 2020, for a household of 4 in Chattanooga, the median income, annual income, was $72,600. That's at 100%, meaning, according to the census, I looked it up, the census said we have 183,000 residents in Chattanooga now, growing a lot. So divide that by half. Half of those people, their household income is above 72,600. Half of those people, their income is below 72,600 for a household of 4. That could be 2 working people, one working person. Just a combination of 4 people in the household. The pilot is for 80% of that 72,600. So these are folks who are below the line because they do not make 72,600. Their household income is below that. Their household income for household of 4 is $58,100. The pilot, we have other programs, but the pilot is specifically for incomes that go from very low, which is 30%, 60% to 80%. Okay, will you go to the next slide, Daisy? Thank you. Now, why is this so important? I got this information from our government affairs person at the Association of Realtors here in Chattanooga. This is astonishing. I mean, if for y'all, it probably is. We follow this stuff every day. Year over year. Last January, we don't have the numbers for February, obviously. Last January, there were nearly 62, in January, there were 62% fewer listings, fewer properties available for sale than there were in January. Okay, so if you think about supply and demand, there are 62% fewer, there were last month, properties for sale. There are a number of reasons that that's the case. What's more astonishing is that these are 2019, 2020, 2021. Those are the median sales prices of houses. This is not houses listed. These are houses that sold. 2019, the median was 180,000. 2020, the median was 205. 2021, as of January, included, it's $235,000. Now, Public Works just talked about the rule of 72. The rule of 72 is a slow burn, if you will. If you look at 2019 and compare it to 2021, that's over a 30% increase in the price of housing in Chattanooga. Okay. What's happening is investors are buying up houses that folks would ordinarily be renting, and they are improving those properties and selling those properties, which pulls that inventory out of the market. Okay, at various rates. It's just pulling that inventory out of the market. If you look at the lower part of that slide, which is what was presented on the previous slide, a household whose income is $72,600 should not buy a house for $235,000. They certainly, the price of housing for sale and rental housing, there's a correlation. So when we talk about the pilot and the need for a pilot, when housing costs are going up, and I don't think they will forever at this rate, but from 2019 to 2021, there's a 30% increase in the median price of housing in Chattanooga. Okay, and there are a lot of reasons for that. We don't have time to talk about that, but there are a lot of reasons why that's happening. I mentioned earlier the increase in our population. There's some reasons that population drive is driving up very quickly the price of for sale housing and for rent housing. Okay, so just to give you that framework, when we talk about the need for affordable housing, that's what we're talking about. In the rental market, just like it is in the for sale market, households, if they spend more than 30% of their income, they're house burdened. Okay, they're housing burdened. Okay, and then Daisy, if you'll go to the next slide. So under the current pilot, a developer is required to reserve 50% of their units for households whose income are 80% of the area median income or below. That's practically impossible to do unless you are a special kind of developer who not only serves 80% of AMI, they also serve other tiers of incomes. And the reason they can do that is because they have multiple financing in their capital stack. A pilot is nobody's going to get a pilot and do 50% of their units for 80% of AMI. It's not feasible. But the good news is we knew when we did this that we were going to attract developers who would do housing for 30% of AMI, 60% of AMI, as well as 80% of AMI. Next slide, please. So I know you guys are really interested in what Daisy has to show, so I'm going to go through this. These are all of our pilots. I'll do them very, very quickly. These are the most recent ones. They're in reverse chronological order. This one you all approved very recently, Battery Heights. It's a $12 million investment, 142 units. Next, please. Bayberry Apartments. Oh, you skipped one. There you go. Thank you. Bayberry, $12 million investment, 163 units. Both of those developments are a high percentage of income restricted housing for the lower part of our income spectrum. Next one, please. Chestnut Flats, 100% affordable, $22 million, 199 units. Next one, please. Patton Towers, 240 units, $34 million investment by the developer. Next unit. Next one, sorry. Ridgeway Apartments, 199 units, $14 million. These are all these projects I've told you about so far, 50%, even though the requirement is 50% of the units for 80% of AMI, all of those developers, they do housing for folks that are 30% of AMI, 60% of AMI, and some 80% of AMI, but most of them don't go that high. Next one. This is the first pilot program, the first resolution for the pilot. You guys may remember that under the Burke administration, we took the pilot program in-house. It had traditionally been done by an outside agency. We brought that in-house. At that time, the requirement was 20% of the units for 80% of AMI. Next, please. The following, these that I'm getting ready to talk to you about fall under that 20%. So Market City Center, $28 million. We got 25 units at 80%. Next, please. 1400 Chestnut, 210 units, $25 million investment. We got 42 units out of that one. Next. The McClellan Building, $10 million investment, 18 units. Next. Passenger Flats, $4 million investment. They had 20 units, but they decided to give the pilot back because They do market rate housing, and market rate housing is very popular and profitable. So they returned their pilot. Next slide, please. View on Fifth, they also delivered 13 units, $7 million investment. All right, and these are the pilots that fell under the 2002 pilot, which was the original one that the city adopted. Next slide, please. These, you'll see the year that they expire. You'll see the various development. We don't have any information, we don't have adequate information to report to you all because when we took over the program, the data that we collect had not been collected. So these are projects that the first one you see expired. We have one expiring this year. We have another one expired in 2018. So one expiring this year, two expired in 2018, and one expired last year. That was really fast. That's what I wanted to share with you guys. Oh, thank you, Daisy. There's also, you're all familiar with the JC Towers, 175 units. All of those units are low income. And that was a $16 million investment. You guys won't remember this because the pilots, the state law allows for PHAs, public housing authorities, to serve as their own pilots. It's if the property is owned by a public housing authority, they don't pay property taxes. But that was a purchase and rehab for 175 low income, predominantly seniors in that development. And you all approved a pilot, I think it was last week, for C&E. That's about $5.5 million. We did not include that because it has not yet gone before the HEB or the county commission. And then we have one on the agenda this evening that's $52 million. We did not put that one on there for obvious reasons. But if those two were to be approved, let me put it this way, with the ones that have been approved, it's a $180 million investment that has been made in either the rehab, purchase and rehab, or new construction of income restricted housing, $180 million. And I can't remember offhand how many units there are, but hundreds and hundreds of units. And I will take any questions you have, but I know we want to leave time for Daisy. Thank you.
We do have a couple of hands, Councilman Burrs, followed by Councilman Gilbert. So Councilman Burrs, if you want to get your question answered, you're on mute. Thank you.
Yeah, no question. That was a great presentation. Would you send that out to all of us, please?
Be happy to, sure, be happy to.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Byrd, Councilman Gilbert.
Some of these matured already for his pallets. So I would like to know before and after, before the pallet was presented, how much the value of the property was, and then after the pallet is over, how much money we getting for her taxes.
Oh, yes, sir. Daisy, you're going to get into a little bit of that, right?
Just a little bit of it, yes.
Yeah.
Can you send it to us, Daisy? We might not be able to go through all of it today.
Oh, it's not, it's only 2 slides here we have today.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, is that an old hand, Councilwoman Burrs?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay, and I saw Chairman Henderson. You gonna wait on yours?
Yeah,
I see you.
Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay, all right, Miss Madison, it's yours.
Actually, I don't really have a whole lot here. I really wasn't sure exactly what you needed. However, so what I did was to tag on to Ms. Williams and essentially took the projects that she has just explained to you and give you an indication of the amount of the waivers, but at the same time also the level of investments that have been made in the communities for housing purposes, if you will. So really this is just an indication of the amount of taxes that have been waived, which is sort of what Councilman Gilbert was after in terms of how much the city would get had these pilots been paying at 100%. So we have Battery Heights. That particular pilot is not ready yet, but it is estimated at 12 million. Should they invest that entire 12 million, we would waive $273,240 annually in property taxes. And Bayberry Apartments, this particular one, they have paid 2016 through 19, and we didn't get the 2020 because some of them haven't paid yet, so we just stopped at the 2020. And that particular project, in the 2 years that they've been paying, 2018 and 19, they have paid $66,000, but they have waived, but we have waived $166,000. I don't really need to go through all of these, but you get the gist. Only 2 of them have really paid. And most of that is because of the terms of the agreement. In these particular 2 pilots, the amount that they would pay was frozen at the time that they entered into the pilot, and which is not uncommon. You freeze what you continue to pay on the base, but in this particular case, it continues throughout a partial portion of, if you will, the pilot itself. And it doesn't just begin when the pilot takes effect. So the rest of these are 100%, and these are the ones that Donna just went into, and that is the investment. She gave the initial investment or the amount of the proposed investment in accordance with the contract. These amounts represent what those particular pilots have actually invested, the amount that is assessed on the tax roll for the years that you see here. The amount, some of them are not finished, but portions of it have come to the tax roll. So these are not necessarily just the estimate, and it's not the complete pilot, if you will, but that's where we are at this point. This slide, of course, is only those individuals, those properties that were in place prior to this administration. So as you can see, lots of them are about to end. Bread Factory, as you talked about, it has already ended. Now this slide shows 10 years of pilot payments from 2010 to 2019. And over that period of time, the Bread Factory, up until the time from 2010 to 2018, we waived $91,000, they paid $50,000 in pilot payments. So over that period of time, they essentially waived 64%. And at the point, if they go back on the tax roll at 100%, of course, then they would have been paying $140,000. MK, 148 versus 31. This one hasn't ended, but it will end next year in 2021. But over the past 10 years, we have waived 78% of the taxes. But the flip side of that, we have collected 22% of the taxes. So, like I said, I won't go through these individually. There's only one of these older pilots, if you will, who are still paying 100%, and I'm sure you all are familiar with Walnut Commerce in that regard. Now, what I don't have here is a listing of all of the pilots that are currently outstanding, and that is a pretty massive list, and I realize you didn't have time, but I will tell you, to Councilman Gilbert's request, since 2010 to 2019, total economic development pilot that have been waived is $96 million. Got to realize, though, that includes Volkswagen, which is a vast majority of the 100% waivers in our pilots. And from a housing perspective, 2.2 million. So in the past 10 years, if you take all of our pilots together, they have waived a total of 80%, 86% for housing projects and 81% for economic development projects. And there again, most of that has to do with, from the economic development projects, most of that has to do with Volkswagen, of course. And that's it. I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Daisy. Chairman Henderson, I see your hand, sir.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. Here's the problem I have, Ms. Madison, is, trying to make a financial decision on, I sort of see these pilots as sort of loans for investment properties. I mean, if I'm gonna go out and start purchasing investment properties to make me money in the future, I obviously have to limit what I can purchase at a time, or else I'm in a place where I can't make the payments for those investment properties and I wind up losing them. That's where I feel like I am, and trying to make a decision on, these pilots look great. There's no doubt we need affordable housing, but at the same time, these have to cost us something until these pilots get paid off, till they come to maturity. And I still don't know what the financial strain of even the pilot that we're voting on tonight will cause on our budget. It obviously creates more service. And as we layer these pilots on top of each other, there has to be a financial implication. And I don't know what they are. I'll just be honest with you. And I still don't know what they are. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Daisy, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, the only small thing I was going to say is, in the pilots that they talked about, of all of the taxes that were waived, at the same time, we also comment on the amount of taxes that were paid by those particular companies. And it's not the same as 100%, but there again, the biggest one being Volkswagen, of course. And the biggest one being Volkswagen. But I can't deny the fact that there will be some cost. It's there again, it would take a specialist, an economist, and a lot of times they put numbers in place, and and the extent to which they come to pass, we just have to wait and see. But I think pilots are definitely necessary. I think the terms of the pilot is what we need to focus on, not necessarily a pilot or not a pilot. The question is, what will the terms of those pilots be? And our pilots now are pretty much 100%, 100%, except for schools.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Councilman Gilbert.
Just real quick, Daisy, I'll call you because I didn't still get my question answered, but I'll give you a call.
Okay.
And Chairman, if I may, Councilman Henderson, totally understand your point. I think what we could take a look at, and I agree with Daisy, we would need a real economist to do some of the stuff, is, and I'm right now, what's top of mind for me is the $52 million investment that could potentially go in across the street from Vesicol. So whatever we give up for the term of that, when that term ends, they will be paying taxes on what will at that point be much more valuable than $52 million. And so the question is, that investment, do we want to, not just totally aside from the fact that we are desperately in need of affordable housing, but just removing that from the equation, is the return on the investment worth it to get the taxes for a $52 million project that, depending upon the appreciation rate, 10, 12 years from now could be $70 million? Is the deferral of those taxes worth the return that the city would get at that time? I also recall in the presentation that the school portion is going to be $1.8 million. And that particular site is I think, more poignant than others, because that site's been available, as is the Vesicol site, for a long time. So affordable housing for 30% AMI upwards, $52 million. no taxes for, I can't remember the term, that will be worth much more than $52 million at the end of that term. And they will begin paying the taxes on that asset. So that, I think that may be one way to look at it. And that really doesn't require an economist. I know how to run those numbers myself. So I could do that one. Totally understand what you're saying though. Really do.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I may just tell Councilman Henderson, I have those same questions. And it's a hard balance. And the question becomes, is it something, do you have to incentivize to get what you want? Can you get it without it? And if you can't get it without it, is it important enough to you to incentivize to get it?
Yeah, and that's a math equation too, right? So those types of things, as it relates to housing, I yield to you.
Okay.
And economists on the
Mr. Chair, we're rolling up on 6 o'clock. We probably need a break. So
okay. I'm good. So no, obviously no attorney-client, unless it's gonna be 5 minutes, I guess. Phil?
Mr. Attorney, how critical is this attorney-client? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, please, sir.
You still muted, Phil.
There we go. We had a mediation coming up, but I believe that may be continued here. I really think we'll have to probably call you individually here to get authority.
Okay, we'll just handle it with a phone call then?
Yes, sir, believe so.
Okay.
Great. All right, thank you. That's all I have for ECD. So we are adjourned for about 2 or 3 minutes. So everybody log off and I'll see you in about 5 minutes.